At 10:30 hours on October 30th, 1942, Lieutenant Commander Herschel Smith stood on the damaged flight deck of USS Enterprise at Numere, New Caledonia, watching 75 CBS weld steel plates over bomb craters that should have sunk his ship 4 days earlier. The carrier was Enterprise CV6, 25,000 tons, 824 feet long, the most decorated warship America would ever put to sea. She had just survived the Battle of Santa Cruz with 2 direct bomb hits, 75 wounded, and 44 dead. Her forward elevator was jammed. Her hull had a massive bulge on the starboard side. One fuel tank was still leaking. By every regulation in the Navy, she needed months in a shipyard. But there were no other carriers left. Lexington was gone, sunk at Coral Sea. Yorktown was gone, destroyed at Midway. Wasp was gone, torpedoed 2 months ago. Hornet had just been sunk at Santa Cruz 4 days earlier. Saratoga was in Pearl Harbor under repair from torpedo damage. Enterprise was the only operational American carrier in the entire Pacific Ocean. The only one standing between the Japanese Navy and total control of the Solomon Islands. Japanese intelligence knew this. They had declared Enterprise sunk 3 separate times in the past 10 months. First after the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August, then after Santa Cruz in October. Each time American propaganda countered the claims. Each time Enterprise appeared again in battle, broken but fighting. The Japanese began calling her something else, the Gray Ghost, the ship that refused to die. Smith had been Enterprise's damage control officer since April 1942. He was Naval Academy class of 1922 from Michigan. He had been trained as a line officer, qualified to command ships, but his expertise was damage control. He understood how ships were built, where they were strong, where they were weak, how damage propagated through a vessel, how to stop it. Smith knew every frame, every bulkhead, every watertight door, every fireman, every pump, every electrical junction, every ventilation trunk on Enterprise. He had walked every compartment, crawled through every void space, traced every system. When damage occurred, he did not need blueprints. He could visualize in his mind exactly what was broken, exactly what was threatened, exactly what needed to be done. His damage control teams were trained to a level few other ships could match. Every man knew his role. Every team knew their equipment. They drilled constantly. Fire drills, flooding drills, bomb damage drills. They drilled in daylight, in darkness, in rough seas, in calm seas. They drilled until muscle memory took over, until they could work without thinking, until chaos became routine. When the first bomb hit Enterprise at Eastern Solomons in August, Smith was on the bridge. He felt the explosion, saw smoke boiling up from the flight deck. He did not wait for damage reports. He ran down ladders through passageways filled with smoke toward the damage. His teams were already there, hoses spraying foam, men carrying the wounded, sailors throwing burning debris overboard. Smith assessed the situation in seconds. The bomb had penetrated 3 decks. Fires were spreading after. Electrical power was out to half the ship. He gave orders. Contain the fire here. Shore up this bulkhead. RRO power through these circuits. Pump water from these compartments. The teams executed. The fires were contained. The ship survived. At Santa Cruz in October, Enterprise took 2 direct hits and 2 near misses within 5 minutes. Smith was below decks when the first bomb hit. The explosion knocked him off his feet. Lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later. He got up, checked himself for injuries, found none, started running toward the damage. The second bomb hit before he got there. This explosion was closer. The blast wave threw him against a bulkhead. His ears rang. His vision blurred, but he kept moving. The forward part of the ship was chaos. Smoke filled the passageways. Men were screaming. Some were on fire. Some were trapped under wreckage. Electrical cables hung from overhead, sparking. Water was pouring in from ruptured fire mains. Smith started giving orders. Get these men out. Cut that power. Close these hatches. Pump this compartment. His voice cut through the chaos. His teams responded. They knew he would not order them to do anything impossible. They trusted him. They followed him. The damage from Santa Cruz should have sunk Enterprise. 2 bombs penetrating to interior spaces, near misses buckling the hull, flooding in multiple compartments, fires threatening magazines. Any one of these problems could doom a ship if not controlled immediately. All of them together should have been overwhelming, but Smith and his teams controlled them all. They saved the ship. At Noumea, Smith supervised repairs for 4 days with Seabees. The CBS were construction workers, not damage control specialists, but they were skilled welders, carpenters, mechanics. Smith told them what needed to be done. They figured out how to do it. They worked in shifts 12 hours a day. Welders burned through electrode rods by the hundreds. Carpenters shaped wooden plugs to fit jagged holes in the flight deck. Mechanics' jury rigged the jammed elevator with cables and pulleys. It was not perfect. It was not pretty. But it worked. When Enterprise sailed on November 11th with repairs incomplete, Smith knew the ship was vulnerable. If they took another hit in the bow section where the first bomb had struck at Santa Cruz, the hastily welded steel plates might give way. If they took a hit near the damaged elevator, the whole mechanism could collapse into the hangar deck. If they took a torpedo hit where the near miss had buckled the hull, the compartment would flood faster than pumps could handle. Enterprise could sink in minutes. But Smith also knew that no battle plan survived contact with the enemy. Ships got hit. Sailors got killed. All he could do was prepare his teams to respond fast, respond correctly, respond as if their lives and everyone else's lives depended on what they did in the next few minutes. Because they did. During the 4 days at Guadalcanal, November 12th through November 15th, Enterprise was not hit again. Smith and his teams were lucky. The Japanese were too busy being destroyed by American aircraft to attack the carrier effectively. But the CBS kept working. They finished repairs on the elevator. They reinforced the hull patches. They restored systems to full capability. By the time Enterprise returned to Noumea on November 16th, she was in better shape than when she had sailed 5 days earlier. The ship had been repaired during combat operations. It was unprecedented. Then the message came through on November 10th. Japanese battleships were heading for Guadalcanal. They planned to bombard Henderson Field, destroy the American airbase, then land reinforcements to retake the island. Enterprise had to sortie now tonight, no matter her condition. Captain Osborne Hardison received the order at 1800 hours. He was 49 years old, Naval Academy class of 1916 from North Carolina. He had commanded Enterprise for exactly 10 days. He looked at the damage reports, looked at Smith, asked one question. Can she fight? Smith told him the truth. The forward elevator was still jammed. The hull still had leaks. The watertight integrity was compromised. If they took another hit in the wrong place, Enterprise would sink fast. But her engines worked, her steering worked, her catapults could launch aircraft. She could fight. Hardison gave the order. Enterprise would sail at 0600 on November 11th, with the CBS still aboard, welders still working, air hammers still pounding, repair crews still trying to fix what battle had broken. What happened over the next 4 days would decide the Guadalcanal campaign and prove that one damaged carrier mattered more than all the pristine battleships the Japanese could bring to bear. The problem was not that America lacked ships. By November 1942, American shipyards were launching new destroyers, cruisers, battleships at record pace, but carriers took longer to build. The new Essex-class carriers would not arrive until 1940. The Independence-class light carriers would not be ready until mid-1943. For now, in November 1942, Enterprise was all there was. The Japanese knew this advantage would not last. They had to destroy American forces at Guadalcanal before American industrial power overwhelmed them. They committed their combined fleet to a massive operation. Battleships, He and Karishima, would bombard Henderson Field. Cruisers and destroyers would escort troop transports. Carriers would provide air cover. The operation would crush American resistance and reclaim Guadalcanal. On the American side, the situation was desperate. Marines on Guadalcanal held Henderson Field by their fingernails. They needed air support. They needed supplies. They needed Enterprise to get aircraft close enough to fight Japanese ships heading south. Enterprise left Noumea Harbor at dawn on November 11th. She made the open sea with her deck still shaking from air hammers, welder sparks still flashing, the big bulge in her starboard side clearly visible, fuel oil still seeping from ruptured tanks. The CBS kept working. Smith supervised repairs even as Enterprise headed into combat. The carrier's air group had been devastated at Santa Cruz. VF-10, The fighter squadron called the Grim Reapers had lost half their pilots. VB-10, the dive bomber squadron, had lost aircraft and crews. VT-10, the torpedo squadron, was down to barely functional strength. But they could still fly. They could still fight. On November 12th, Enterprise launched her first strikes against Japanese forces approaching Guadalcanal. The carrier was 200 minutes from the combat zone. Her aircraft had to fly through weather fronts, navigate by dead reckoning, find targets in open ocean, then return to a moving ship. The pilots had been doing this for months. They made it look routine. It was not. Her bombers found cruiser Kinugasa at 0900 hours, steaming northwest after bombarding Henderson Field the previous night. The cruiser thought she had escaped. She was wrong. Enterprise dive bombers. Douglas SBD Dauntless aircraft from Bombing Squadron 10 rolled in from 12,000 feet. The ship tried to maneuver, throwing up anti-aircraft fire, but the American pilots had practiced dive bombing for years. They hit her with 500-pound bombs at 9 a.m. in the morning. The first bomb hit the 13mm machine gun mount in front of the bridge. The explosion started a fire in the forward gasoline storage area. Captain Sawa and his executive officer died instantly. The ship began listing to port. Near misses caused additional flooding. A second wave of bombers arrived. More hits knocked out the cruiser's engines and rudder. Without propulsion or steering, Kinugasa was doomed. She capsized and sank. At 13 full hours, 511 of her crew went down with her. Enterprise aircraft returned to the carrier. The pilots reported the kill. They refueled and rearmed. They ate cold sandwiches in the ready room. They waited for the next mission. Some of them were 19 years old. Some had been in combat for 9 months. All of them knew that more targets were coming. That night, November 12th into November 13th, American cruisers and destroyers fought a desperate surface battle against Japanese battleship Hei and her escorts. The action started just after 0:30 hours. The two forces encountered each other at point-blank range in darkness. Searchlights snapped on. Guns opened fire. The range was so close that some shells passed through ships without exploding because the fuses had not armed. He was a Congo-class battleship, 14,000 tons, 814 guns, heavily armored. She should have destroyed the American force, but the night action was chaos. American destroyers launched torpedoes. American cruisers fired at close range. He took dozens of 8-in and 6-in shell hits. Her steering was damaged. Her forward turrets were knocked out. A torpedo hit flooded compartments. By dawn, she was crippled, unable to make more than 8 knots circling northwest of Savo Island. The Japanese should have scuttled her then, should have abandoned ship and let her sink, but they tried to save her. Destroyers stood by, ready to take off the crew. Tugs were dispatched from the Shortland Islands. They thought they had time. They were wrong. November 13th at dawn. Enterprise aircraft found he at 0615, limping north at 8 knots, trailing oil, listing 5 degrees to starboard, trying to reach safety before American bombers could finish her. The battleship was 30 AMI northwest of Savo Island. Her escorts, 3 destroyers, were still with her, but they could not protect her from what was coming. Enterprise launched the first strike at 0630. 6 F4F Wildcat fighters for combat air patrol. 9 SBD Dauntless dive bombers loaded with 1,000-pound bombs. 6 Teeve Avenger torpedo planes carrying Mark 13 torpedoes. They found he at 0721. The dive bombers went in first from 10,000 feet. The battleship maneuvered sluggishly, her steering still damaged from the night battle. The bombs hit. One struck near the forward turret. Another hit midship. Fire started. The torpedo planes attacked from low altitude, skimming the water at 200 feet, dropping torpedoes at 1,500 yards. The battleship's anti-aircraft guns fired desperately. Tracers filled the air. One Avenger was hit, crashed into the sea, but the other torpedoes ran true. At least 2 hit the battleship's port side. Underwater explosions opened the hull to the sea. Then Marine aircraft arrived from Henderson Field. More dive bombers, more torpedo planes. They attacked in waves. Then Army B-7 bombers from Espiritu Santo joined the attack, dropping bombs from 20,000 feet. The bombers could not aim precisely from that altitude, but with enough bombs, some would hit, and they did. Wave after wave of attacks continued through the morning and afternoon. Enterprise launched a second strike at 0900, a third strike at 1100. Marine squadrons from Henderson kept rotating through. Army bombers kept coming. The Japanese tried to provide air cover. Zero fighters flew combat air patrol over high, but there were too many American aircraft. The Japanese fighters were outnumbered, overwhelmed. By 400 hours, he had taken an estimated 5 to 8 torpedo hits and 7 to 8 bomb hits. Her hull was breached in multiple locations. Water flooded the lower decks faster than pumps could handle. Fires burned out of control. The captain gave the order to abandon ship. Destroyers came alongside, took off survivors. At 18D hours, as the sun set on November 13th, the Japanese scuttled he with demolition charges. She sank in the evening darkness. 8 or 8 of her crew died. But the battle was not over. More Japanese ships were coming. Cruisers, destroyers, and battleship Kirishima were approaching Guadalcanal for another bombardment run, and 11 Japanese troop transports were steaming south, packed with 10,000 soldiers to retake the island. Enterprise kept launching strikes. Her pilots were exhausted. They had flown multiple missions per day for 3 days. Some had been shot down, rescued, and flew again the same day. The maintenance crews worked miracles, keeping damaged aircraft flying. The CBS kept repairing battle damage from Santa Cruz, while new damage from Japanese air attacks kept appearing. On November 14th, Enterprise bombers found the Japanese troop convoy at 0800 hours. 11 transports tightly packed in formation, heading straight for Guadalcanal at 12 knots. Each transport carried between 800 and 1,000 Japanese soldiers. The soldiers were the veteran troops of the 38th Division, battle-hardened from China, equipped with artillery, tanks, ammunition for a major offensive. If they landed, they could retake Guadalcanal. The Marines at Henderson Field could not stop them. Enterprise dive bombers attacked first at 0830. They rolled in from 12,000 feet, diving at 70 degrees, accelerating to 280 mph, releasing bombs at 1,500 feet, pulling out at 500 feet. The transports had no chance. They were cargo vessels, not warships. Thin hulls, no armor, loaded with fuel and ammunition. When the bombs hit, the ships exploded. The first transport to die was Kinugawa Maru. A 1,000L bomb hit her amidships, penetrated to the engine room, exploded. The ship broke in half. She sank in minutes. 300 soldiers went down with her. Kamboru took 3 hits. Fire spread through the ship. The captain tried to beat her, but she sank before reaching shore. 450 drowned. Brisbane Maru was hit by 2 bombs. One hit the forward hold loaded with ammunition. The explosion blew off the bow. She sank stern first. Marine aircraft from Henderson Field joined the attack at 0900. More dive bombers. They found targets everywhere. The convoy was breaking apart, each ship trying to escape independently. But there was nowhere to run. The ocean was 2,000 fathoms deep here. If a ship sank, men could not swim to shore. They drowned. Army B-16 bombers arrived at 0930 from Espiritu Santo. They bombed from altitude. Their accuracy was poor compared to dive bombers, but the transports were large targets. More hits, more fires, more sinking ships. Enterprise launched a second strike at 1,000 hours. Fresh pilots, more bombs, more torpedoes. They found targets still burning from the first strike. They attacked the survivors. The slaughter continued through midday. By 1400 hours, 7 of the 11 transports had been sunk. Arizona Maru, Brisbane Maru, Kamboru, Kinugawa Maru, Nagara Maru, Nako Maru, and Shinanogawa Maru. All gone. Thousands of soldiers drowned. The survivors clung to wreckage, waiting for rescue that would not come fast enough. The 4 remaining transports, all damaged, burning, tried to reach Guadalcanal to beach themselves. They knew they were doomed, but thought they could at least land their troops before sinking. They steamed through the night, fires visible for miles. American forces on Guadalcanal watched them approach. The ships reached the beach at Tasaparanga at dawn on November 15th and ran themselves ground. Their bows touched shore. Soldiers jumped into the water, waded to the beach. But most had lost their equipment. Their artillery was at the bottom of the ocean. Their tanks were gone. Their ammunition, food, medical supplies, all lost. Of the 10,000 soldiers who left the Shortland Islands, fewer than 2,000 made it to shore with weapons. The rest were dead or had landed with nothing but the clothes they wore. That night, November 14th into November 15th, came the final surface battle. American battleships Washington and South Dakota, with 4 destroyers, intercepted the Japanese force trying to bombard Henderson Field. Battleship Kirishima led 4 cruisers and 9 destroyers south. The night action was devastating. Japanese ships swept aside the American destroyer screen. South Dakota took heavy damage and lost communications. But when the Japanese concentrated fire on South Dakota, they revealed their positions to Washington. The American battleship hammered Kirishima with 16 and 5 guns at close range. Multiple hits set Hiroshima ablaze. The Japanese scuttled her after midnight. The second Japanese battleship lost in 3 days. When dawn broke on November 15th, the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal was over. The Japanese had lost 2 battleships, 1 heavy cruiser, 3 destroyers, and 7 troop transports. The Americans had lost 2 light cruisers and 7 destroyers. But Henderson Field was secure. The Marines would hold Guadalcanal, and Enterprise had been there for all of it. Captain Hardison sent a message to Navy Department on November 16th. The emergency repairs accomplished by this skillful, well-trained, and enthusiastically energetic force have placed this vessel in condition for further action against the enemy. He was talking about Smith and the CBS, the men who kept Enterprise fighting when she should have been in a shipyard. Vice Admiral William Halsey, Commander South Pacific Area, sent a dispatch directly to the CB detachment. Your commander wishes to express to you and the men of the construction battalion serving under you his appreciation for the services rendered by you in effecting emergency repairs during action against the enemy. The repairs were completed by these men with speed and efficiency. I hereby commend them for their willingness, zeal, and capability. But the real story was what those 4 days meant. 1 damaged carrier, kept operational by a damage control officer, and 75 construction workers had helped sink 2 battleships, 1 cruiser and 7 transports. Had helped save Guadalcanal. Had helped turn the Pacific War. The Japanese never attempted another major offensive at Guadalcanal after November 1942. They evacuated their remaining troops in February 1943. The island became an American base for the rest of the war, and it all hinged on those 4 days when Enterprise fought while still under repair. This was not the first time Enterprise had defied death. She had been scheduled to return to Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Bad weather delayed her task force. She arrived December 8th to find the harbor in ruins. Her aircraft had actually flown over Pearl during the Japanese attack. 7 of her dive bombers were shot down by Japanese fighters and American friendly fire. 8 of her airmen died. 2 were wounded. Enterprise was the only American carrier to have men at Pearl Harbor during the attack. 3 days later, December 10th, Enterprise aircraft found and sank Japanese submarine Walt 7 Da. First American warship sunk by American forces after war was declared. Enterprise drew first blood. February 1st, 19 Enterprise Task Force raided Kwajalein, Wuchir, and Maloab in the Marshall Islands. Sank 3 ships, damaged 8, destroyed numerous aircraft and ground installations. Japanese bombers counterattacked. Enterprise maneuvered at high speed. All bombs missed. The carrier escaped with minor damage. April 18th and 42. Enterprise escorted Hornet on the Diddle raid. While 16 Army BT bombers launched from Hornet to bomb Tokyo, Enterprise fighters flew combat air patrol and attacked Japanese picket boats that spotted the task force. The raid shocked Japan, proved their home islands were vulnerable, forced them to pull air defenses back from the front lines. June 4th, 1942, Battle of Midway. Enterprise was flagship for Rear Admiral Raymond Spruant, one of the most intelligent tactical commanders in the U.S. Navy. Spruant understood that carriers were fragile. The timing was everything. That one mistake could lose the battle and possibly the war. The Japanese plan was to occupy Midway Island, draw out the American carriers, and destroy them with overwhelming force. Admiral Yamamoto commanded the combined fleet, 4 carriers in the striking force, 2 more with the occupation force, 7 battleships including his flagship Yamato, the most powerful battleship ever built. The Japanese had more ships, more aircraft, more experienced pilots. They expected an easy victory, but American intelligence had broken the Japanese naval codes. Admiral Nimitz knew the attack was coming. He positioned Enterprise Yorktown and Hornet northeast of Midway, hidden beyond the Japanese search radius, waiting to ambush the strike force. The battle began at 0630 when Japanese carriers launched 108 aircraft to attack Midway. The island's defenders launched everything they had to intercept. Army B-17 bombers, marine fighters, dive bombers, torpedo planes, all attacked the Japanese carriers in uncoordinated strikes. All failed to score hits. The Japanese shot down most of the marine aircraft. Their carriers seemed invincible. At 0705, American carriers launched their strikes. Enterprise sent 30 dive bombers, 14 torpedo planes, 10 fighters. Yorktown launched 17 dive bombers, 12 torpedo planes, 6 fighters. Hornet launched 35 dive bombers, 15 torpedo planes, 10 fighters. Over 150 American aircraft heading southwest to find 4 Japanese carriers. But coordination fell apart. The squadrons became separated. Navigation was difficult. The ocean was vast. Some squadrons flew the wrong direction and never found the enemy. Hornets, fighters, and dive bombers missed the carriers entirely, ran low on fuel, had to ditch or return to the carrier. Enterprise's Torpedo Squadron 6, led by Lieutenant Commander Eugene Lindsay, found the Japanese carriers first at 09 Tunchai. 15. Torpedo bombers, Douglas TBD Devastators, slow, obsolete, vulnerable. They attacked without fighter escort, without dive bombers to split the Japanese defenses. The Zero fighters swarmed them. Japanese ships filled the sky with anti-aircraft fire. The torpedo bombers pressed their attacks at wave-top altitude, dropping torpedoes at point-blank range. 13 of the 15 were shot down. Lindsay was killed. Lieutenant Junior Grade George Gay was the only survivor from his aircraft, clinging to a seat cushion in the ocean, watching the rest of the battle unfold. Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown attacked next. 12 more Devastators. 10 were shot down. Then Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet. 15 aircraft, 14 shot down. Of 41 torpedo planes that attacked, 35 were destroyed. 0 hits on any Japanese carrier. The torpedo attacks seemed to have accomplished nothing but waste American lives. But those torpedo attacks had drawn the Japanese combat air patrol down to sea level. The Zero fighters were chasing torpedo planes, not watching the sky above. And at that moment at 0925, Enterprise dive bombers arrived at altitude. Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky commanded Bombing Squadron 6 and Scouting Squadron 6. A dauntless dive bombers total. He had launched at 0706, flown southwest on the expected intercept course. At 0820, he reached the point where the Japanese carriers should have been. They were not there. McClusky made a decision that changed the war. Instead of returning to Enterprise when his fuel ran low, he expanded his search. He flew northwest, then northeast, searching, hoping, knowing that his aircraft might not have enough fuel to return if he guessed wrong. At 0955, one of McClusky's pilots spotted a lone Japanese destroyer steaming northeast at high speed. McClusky recognized what it meant. The destroyer was racing to rejoin the carrier fleet. He turned to follow. 5 minutes later, at 1000 hours, he saw them. 4 Japanese carriers in formation. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiru. Their flight decks crowded with aircraft being refueled and rearmed. Bombs and torpedoes scattered on deck. Aviation fuel hoses running. The carriers were at their most vulnerable. McClusky did not hesitate. He split his formation. 17 dive bombers would attack Kaga. 16 would attack Akagi. They rolled in from 14,000 feet. The Japanese saw them coming, but too late. 0 fighters were still at sea level, out of position. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire, but could not track dive bombers coming straight down at 300 mph. The dive bombers screamed down at 70° angles. Pilots centered the target in their bomb sights, compensated for wind, released at 1,500 feet, pulled out at 500 feet with crushing G-forces. The bombs fell. They hit. Kaga took 4 direct hits. 1 bomb penetrated the flight deck, exploded in the hangar deck among rearming aircraft. The explosion set off aviation fuel and munitions. Fire spread instantly. Another bomb hit near the island, killed the captain and most of the bridge crew. More bombs hit the flight deck, starting more fires. Within minutes, Kaga was an inferno. Her crew fought the fires, but the damage was catastrophic. She burned for hours before being abandoned and scuttled. Akagi took only one hit, but it was enough. Lieutenant Dick Best, leading a 3-plane section, put his 1000B bomb through the flight deck midship. The bomb exploded among aircraft being rearmed on the hangar deck. Secondary explosions from munitions and fuel turned the hangar into a fireball. Flames spread through the ship. Akagi's damage control could not contain it. By afternoon, the flagship of the strike force, Admiral Nagumo's carrier, was abandoned. She burned through the night and was scuttled at dawn. At the same moment, McClusky's bombers hit Akagi and Kaga. Yorktown's dive bombers attacked Soryu. 3 hits in quick succession. All 3 bombs exploded among rearming aircraft. Soryu was engulfed in flames within minutes. She sank at 7:13 that evening. In 5 minutes, 3 of the 4 Japanese carriers had been mortally wounded. But the battle was not over. Hyo, the 4th carrier, was separated from the others and had not been attacked. At noon, Hiru launched her remaining aircraft against the American carriers. They found Yorktown first, hit her with bombs and torpedoes. Yorktown went dead in the water. Enterprise had to finish Hiru. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Enterprise launched 24 dive bombers. They found Hiru at 50:05. They rolled in. 4 bombs hit, all on the flight deck. Fire started immediately. Hugh fought to survive, but the damage was too severe. She was scuttled the next morning. 4 Japanese carriers destroyed. The cream of the Japanese carrier force, the pilots who had attacked Pearl Harbor, all gone. American losses were Yorktown and destroyer Hammond sunk by submarine. Enterprise and Hornet survived undamaged. The battle was the turning point of the Pacific War, and Enterprise dive bombers, led by McCluskey's decision to expand his search and follow one destroyer, had made the difference. August 24, 1942, Battle of the Eastern Solomons. Enterprise fought off massive Japanese air attacks, while her own aircraft sank light carrier Ryujo. 3 direct bomb hits and 4 near misses hit Enterprise. 74 men killed, 95 wounded. Serious damage to the flight deck and hull, but damage control teams patched the holes. Enterprise steamed back to Pearl Harbor under her own power. Repaired in 5 weeks. Back in action by mid-October. October 26, 1942. Battle of Santa Cruz Islands. 2 more bomb hits. 44 more dead, 75 wounded. Hornet sunk. Enterprise the last carrier standing. By the end of 1942, Enterprise had participated in 5 of the 6 major carrier battles in the Pacific. The only one she missed was Coral Sea, and only because she arrived too late. She had been hit by bombs 5 times, had lost nearly 200 men killed, had been declared sunk by Japanese propaganda 3 times, and she kept fighting. The nickname Gay Ghost fit perfectly. The Japanese could not understand how this ship kept appearing in battles after they claimed to have sunk her. Their intelligence reports were confused, contradictory. Some Japanese commanders thought there must be multiple ships named Enterprise. Others believed American damage control was far better than Japanese estimates suggested. The truth was both. American damage control doctrine was superior to Japanese practice. American carriers had better compartmentalization, better fire suppression systems, better trained repair crews. But Enterprise had something more. She had Smith. She had the CBS. She had captains like Hardison, who would take a damaged ship into battle because the mission demanded it. She had pilots who flew until their aircraft fell apart, then flew borrowed aircraft. She had a crew that believed their ship was special, that she could not be sunk, that they would survive anything. In 1943 and 1944, as new Essex-class carriers joined the fleet, Enterprise's role changed. She was no longer alone, but she was still fighting. She participated in the Gilbert Islands Campaign, the Marshall Islands Campaign, the Strikes Against Truk, the Marianas Campaign, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Battle of Lee Gulf. At Lee Gulf, in October 1944, the largest naval battle in history, Enterprise aircraft sank 3 enemy ships and shot down 52 enemy planes, more than any other carrier in the battle. She took 2 kamikaze hits, but the damage was minor. Enterprise had fought in so many battles that even kamikaze crashes barely slowed her down. In late 1904, Enterprise pioneered night carrier operations. She became the first carrier equipped and trained for round-the-clock air operations. Her night fighters protected the fleet from Japanese night attacks. Her night bombers struck Japanese bases in darkness. The concept proved so successful that the Navy created dedicated night carrier air group ALPS. February 1904. Enterprise supported the invasion of Iwo Jima. Her aircraft flew continuously over the island for 174 hours. 74 hours of continuous air operations. No other carrier in history had matched that endurance. March 1945. Enterprise participated in strikes against the Japanese home islands. Her aircraft bombed Tokyo, Kobe, Nagoya. She took minor bomb damage on March 18th, but continued operations. April 11, 1905. Off Okinawa, a kamikaze hit the forward part of the flight deck. 14 men killed, 34 wounded. The forward elevator was damaged again, just like at Santa Cruz. Enterprise steamed to Yuli for repairs. May 14th, Odawa. Back at Okinawa, another kamikaze. This one penetrated the flight deck and exploded near the forward elevator. 13 men killed, 68 wounded. The explosion blew a hole through multiple decks. Fires raged, but damage control teams contained the damage. Enterprise survived. This was her last wound of World War II. The damage was severe enough that repairs took until late August. By the time Enterprise returned to the Pacific, Japan had surrendered. She missed the surrender ceremony in Tokyo Bay. After 7 years of service and 20 major battles, Enterprise was in a repair dock when the war ended. Her final tally was staggering. 901 enemy aircraft shot down by her fighters and gunners. 1 enemy ship sunk by her bombers. 192 more enemy ships damaged or destroyed. She had steamed over 2,000 miles in wartime operations. Participated in 18 of the 22 major carrier actions in the Pacific, more than any other American ship. Enterprise earned 20 battle stars, 3 more than any other U.S. warship in World War II. She received the Presidential Unit Citation. She received the Navy Unit Commendation. She was the only carrier to receive both. On November 23, 1945 at Southampton, England, the British Admiralty presented Enterprise with the Admiralty Pennant. First time in over 400 years that this honor had been given to a foreign warship. Secretary of the Navy, James Forstall, called Enterprise the one vessel that most nearly symbolizes the history of the United States Navy in World War II. But when the war ended, America forgot. Enterprise was decommissioned on February 17, 1847. Plans to preserve her as a memorial were announced. Fundraising began, but the money never materialized. The ship sat in reserve for years. In 1949, plans to make her a permanent memorial in New York were suspended. Subsequent attempts failed. On July 1, 1958, Enterprise was sold to Lipet Corporation for scrapping. By March 1960, she was gone. Cut up for scrap metal at Kearney, New Jersey. The most decorated ship in U.S. Navy history. The carrier that fought from Pearl Harbor to Okinawa. The gray ghost that refused to die in battle. Destroyed by accountants and indifference, some pieces survived. Her bell went to the Naval Academy at Annapolis. Her stern plate went to Rivervale, New Jersey. An anchor went to the Washington Navy Yard. A few portholes and fittings were saved by veterans, but the ship itself was erased. Herschel Smith, the damage control officer who kept Enterprise fighting through 20 battles, retired from the Navy as a captain. He never received a major decoration for his work. The official records credited Enterprise's survival to her design and her crew. Smith's name appeared in some after-action reports, nothing more. Captain Hardison, who commanded Enterprise during the desperate November 1942 battles, rose to vice admiral before retiring. He died in February 1959 from injuries in a car accident. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. His papers are preserved at the University of North Carolina. The CBS, who repaired Enterprise while under fire at Guadalcanal, returned to construction work after the war. Most never talked about what they had done. They were construction workers, not heroes. They built things. That was all. Wade McClusky, the air group commander who led Enterprise bombers to victory at Midway, retired as a rear admiral. He died in '86. His decisions at Midway, when he spotted a lone Japanese destroyer and followed it to find the enemy fleet, changed the course of the war, but few people remember his name. The pilots who flew from Enterprise, the men who made her the most dangerous ship in the Pacific, mostly returned to civilian life. Some stayed in the Navy, some became airline pilots. Some went back to farms in Iowa, and factories in Michigan, and offices in California. They had fought in the greatest naval war in history. Then they came home and went back to being ordinary Americans. 30,000 men served aboard Enterprise during her 9 years of active service. 103 enlisted men and 1 officer earned all 20 battle stars awarded to the ship. They served through every battle from Pearl Harbor to Okinawa. Their names are preserved in Navy records. Their stories are mostly forgotten. In 1958, the same year Enterprise was sold for scrap, the Navy commissioned a new carrier, USS Enterprise CV6, first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in history. She served for 51 years, longer than any other carrier. Commissioned in November 1961, she deployed to the Mediterranean, the Pacific, participated in the Cuban Missile Crisis, served multiple tours in Vietnam, conducted operations in the Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf. The name lived on through decades of Cold War and beyond. In the future, another Enterprise will be built. CV-80, a Ford supercarrier, is scheduled for completion in the 20s. The name will not die. The tradition continues. But the original Enterprise, the Gray Ghost, the carrier that fought from Pearl Harbor to Okinawa, exists now only in photographs and memories, and in the stories passed down by those who served. There is a lesson in how Enterprise was lost. America spent billions building her. Thousands of men served aboard her. She fought in every major battle of the Pacific War. She earned more decorations than any other ship. She symbolized American naval power at its finest moment. And when the war ended, she was scrapped because no one wanted to pay for her preservation. The failure to save Enterprise became a wake-up call that changed how America preserves its military heritage. After her loss, preservation movements gained momentum and support. Veterans groups organized. Fundraising became more professional. Public awareness increased about the importance of saving these historic vessels before they disappeared forever. USS Intrepid became a museum in New York. USS Hornet became a museum in California. USS Lexington became a museum in Texas. USS Yorktown became a museum in South Carolina. 4 Essex-class carriers were saved. 1 Midway-class carrier was saved. These ships now educate millions of visitors each year about naval history, about sacrifice, about the men who served. But Enterprise, the ship that mattered most, the carrier that earned more battle stars than any other, was gone. That loss taught America a lesson it would not forget. In 1991, a historian researching carrier operations in World War II found the full story of Enterprise in Navy archives. The war damage reports, the action reports, the citations, the crew rosters, the story of how one carrier damaged at Santa Cruz and repaired by CBS fought through the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal and changed the Pacific War. The historian tried to find veterans to interview. Many had died, but some remained. They were in their 70s by then. They remembered. They remembered the smell of aviation fuel and burning metal. They remembered the sound of aircraft engines and anti-aircraft guns. They remembered the feeling of the deck shaking under bomb impacts. They remembered their shipmates who died. They remembered November 1942, when Enterprise was the only American carrier left. When she sailed into battle while still under repair, when CBS welded steel plates on her flight deck while Japanese aircraft attacked. They remembered that their ship had made the difference. That is how naval power actually works in war. Not through the newest ships or the biggest guns, but through sailors and officers who keep damaged ships fighting. Through construction workers who repair carriers under fire. Through pilots who fly one more mission when they are too exhausted to see straight. Through damage control teams who fight fires and patch holes while the ship heads back into combat. Enterprise was the most dangerous American warship of World War II. Not because she was the biggest or newest or most advanced. She was dangerous because she would not quit. She was dangerous because her crew believed she could not be sunk. She was dangerous because every time the Japanese declared her destroyed, she appeared again. The Gray Ghost, the ship that refused to die. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more stories from World War II, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more forgotten battles, hidden histories, and untold soldier stories to life. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. What event or perspective would you like to see next?
I read every comment.